Hello, and welcome to Mental Health Matters. I'm your host, Liz Lang. Each week on this podcast, we will break down various aspects of mental health. We are so excited you're here and hope you enjoy this week's episode. Hey guys, Liz Lang here with Jeremiah and Selina from Core Connection. And this week we are going to get into confidence without arrogance. And before we do that,
Before that,
I'm
I think you should keep that. And
right?
Before that.
And before that, I have this week's parenting moment, which is actually, again, my parents' parenting moment, but it was something that I was thinking about a few weeks ago and something that I really appreciated. I feel like my parents did really well. So in high school, I was not a straight A student. In fact, I only graduated with like a 3.2 GPA. And I felt like I worked really hard and learning just didn't come easy to me. And, my parents never came down on me for my grades. And don't get me wrong, like a 3.2 meant I was an AB student, right? So I was by no means failing anything. And I did work hard in school. But I've always appreciated that my parents, they never harped on me if I didn't get straight A's. And for a long time, I thought I just wasn't good at school and high school, or I thought maybe I'm just not very smart. And then as I've gotten older and I'm in college and I'm doing much better academically, it dawned on me that's not the case at all. Really, it was where I put my focus. I was so heavily involved in extracurricular activities in high school. And my parents recognized that and they also supported that. So not only did they not harp about me with my grades, they also never required me to get a job. They knew I didn't have time for a job because I was just so busy with extracurriculars. And I feel like that was very valuable for me in high school. Now, I'm not saying that that's the way every kid should do it and that's, the best way to parent or something like that. I'm just saying this is what my parents did for me. And as I look back, I'm really grateful for the opportunity that they gave me to be so involved. Because as we've talked about recently, there is more to life than academics. And it's not that they're not important because they are. We talked about this last week. There's so much value that is learned in high school, but there's more to life. And so, I've always really appreciated that my parents allowed me to do that, to just be involved in all the things that I wanted to.
I think that's a great example of your parents allowing you to make those choices and understand and figure out. Because look, in the end, you might not have learned that right in high school and changed your grades, but in the end, you learned and realized that a couple of things that, like there's more to life than that. And your parents let you explore and do the things that you are interested in. And it was probably a lot more pleasant and happy than them hounding you all the time about your grades for both of you. And then you did learn that lesson, like, oh, hey, it was because I didn't put forth or I didn't focus on or I didn't have that effort. Of course, I didn't do as well in that area. So I feel like you learn those lessons maybe in a different way than them just hounding you.
Yeah. Okay. So confidence without arrogance, helping teens believe in themselves while staying grounded. This is a good one because I feel like teens tend to be arrogant sometimes. And self-confidence is a good thing. In fact, it's very important. And I think maybe it's more of just human beings can be arrogant sometimes. I think that's just kind of in our nature, is to be arrogant in some form or another in some area of life. Because let's be honest, we're all good at something. And I think it's good to be confident in what we're good in. But I think oftentimes it can turn into arrogance. So let's start by exploring the difference between confidence and arrogance. So I'm going to open with a question. Have you ever met someone who seemed incredibly confident only to realize they were actually insecure, or someone who was quietly confident without ever needing to prove it. So, interesting dichotomy there.
I think we've all met those people. And, this is an interesting topic because working in a highly religious community, this is something I come across quite often. And the struggle here is often that individuals feel like they have to be humble, and they can't be confident if they're humble. And that's wrong, but that's what they start to believe. And they struggle to understand the difference between confidence and arrogance, because they are very, very, very different. And typically, when we come across someone who seems incredibly confident, they're masking their insecurities and their own struggles and trying to prove to the world that they're confident because they're not.
Yeah.
And those who are confident are usually pretty quiet about it, because someone who's confident doesn't have anything to prove to anybody. So when we look at confidence is more of an area where we understand where we're strong. We understand that we can still learn. The brightest people in the world understand that they don't know everything and that they can learn. And so the other piece of that is that when we start to compare ourselves to others and we look at other successes as some sort of competition with us, we are not confident, we are arrogant. And when we understand that we're confident, when somebody else succeeds, we can be happy for them. There's a quote, I can't remember who said it at this point, but there was a quote I heard one time that says that we are not diminished by somebody else's successes. And confident individuals understand that. They can be happy for somebody else when they succeed or when they win or whatever the case may be, right? When they get an award instead of us. This is a tough one for kids because we kind of live in this world today of participation trophies, and I hate it. I think it's terrible. It is good for kids to see others succeed and to also know that just because they succeeded doesn't mean I failed.
Yeah. And I also do think that it can be a normal human experience, maybe when somebody gets recognition that you felt like you deserved. And we've all experienced that. And I think where confidence comes in to play here is recognizing and owning, hey, I feel that disappointment, but real confidence comes when you can just congratulate that person and not make a big stink about it and, own and recognize, hey, I feel these feelings, like I have these feelings, but I'm not so arrogant that I'm going to say something about it. Right. So I think that is where, confidence can come in. But I think teens are especially going to feel that, like, wow, this person got this award, but, I saw something that the coach didn't, and maybe I felt like I deserved that award. Right. It's normal to feel those emotions, and they're not inherently wrong, but, confidence is how we manage them.
Yeah, it is normal. We are going to feel those things, and it's kind of what we do with those feelings that matters. I think really the key here is that confidence isn't about thinking that you're better than everybody else. It's just more about being secure that you don't need to compare yourself to everybody else.
So I'm probably one of those people, I didn't realize I was masking, but I have people tell me quite often, oh, you're so funny. You are to say the funniest things. But what it really is that I'm very insecure and very uncomfortable in situations. And I guess that's just how it comes out for me, is that I say really funny things. But people think that I'm really confident. I'm able to say things or hold myself a certain way. But I've learned that self-confidence is different than self-esteem. Self-confidence comes from your thoughts about yourself, and that's accepting the good and the bad, realizing that you can do really good and you also, there's things that you're really not good at. It's more of, I know my strengths, and I also know that what makes up me is other things that I need to work on or that I don't. So being okay with yourself. and loving yourself and having that relationship with yourself, because self-esteem is more about how I feel about myself. And just to reiterate what Jeremiah said, that there's a difference when you're talking about arrogance and pride and, being humble and trying to understand that. And arrogance and pride is you think you're better than somebody else. So you can have self-confidence and have a relationship with yourself and be proud and happy with who you are without being arrogant or prideful. You can still be humble. Humble is having self-confidence and knowing your strengths and your abilities, whereas pride is thinking you're better than other people.
Right, which one is very pleasant to be around and a joy to work with, and the other one, we've all worked with somebody who's been arrogant, and it's not fun to work with that person. In fact, it's really frustrating. And how we can teach humility to teens, I don't know if we necessarily want to teach humility. So let's come at this from a different angle. Here's a question for you. Do you think that arrogance is always masking insecurity, or do you think somebody can truly be arrogant?
Yes.
Okay.
It's not always. I'm pretty cautious about putting always labels on just about anything, because there's different scenarios and situations that exist. Just because somebody is arrogant doesn't mean they're masking their insecurities. They could just be truly arrogant. They may be very, very good at what they do. And in that case, they're probably lacking some humility. I think that maybe our focus right now in this podcast ought to be on how do we build confidence in children? Where does that come from? Why are some children confident? And I think as parents, this is the part where we kind of screw things up quite often. We tend as parents to not want our kids to have to go through anything hard. We want to make them feel good about themselves. We want to, let them make all their choices and whatever the case may be. And that actually damages confidence. We build confidence through overcoming challenges, through failures, through problem solving, through learning about our mistakes and learning from our mistakes. We build our confidence by keeping commitments, serving others, and developing what's called competence, to be competent in different things. So as parents, when we take away every problem, when we solve everything, when we rescue them, what we're actually teaching our children is that someone else has to do everything for me. I'm not capable, so somebody else has to do it. Selina loves to say to our children, I am fully confident in your ability to make the right decision. And that frustrates them sometimes. But there is so much purpose in that statement that she makes to our children. And that purpose is to build confidence. Because even if they make the wrong choice, they have the opportunity to learn from that mistake. And when they learn from the mistake, they become confident. So we need to stop getting in the way and solving everything and start putting some of that responsibility back on our children to overcome challenges, to keep commitments, to do the different things that are required of us as human beings.
Unfortunately, I think something that plays into this is comparison, because we are so good at comparing ourselves to other people and their skills. We always compare our worst to their best, right? When we're seeing social media or seeing other people and what they're experiencing in their life. And so I think that comparison plays into thinking that you need to be better than other people, or I'm not good enough, and you're not focusing on your strengths and your abilities and your ability to overcome and become who you want to be.
Well, and as parents, we compare our children often to one another, to their siblings. We compare them to their friends. We compare them to athletes. And we probably don't even realize we're doing it. We do these comparisons. And when we do that, what we're actually communicating to our children, you need to be somebody else. You need to become somebody different than what you are. You're not good enough who you are. You've got to be more like this individual or more like that individual. Oh, you want to play sports? You better practice like so-and-so does. That's a comparison, and it's not healthy. And we destroy confidence when we compare. So I appreciate Selina sharing that.
Comparison is the thief of joy, is what Teddy Roosevelt said. And he's exactly right. And he was probably talking about our tendency to compare ourselves to others, which I think to some degree we're all going to do. And it's just something that, as human beings, we work on and we just acknowledge. But yeah, I agree. As kids, and it's so easy to compare kids to ourselves or to say something in the moment of, well, why can't you be more like this? And the problem with that is they then get this idea that, oh, I'm not good enough, or mom and dad like this other sibling better, right? When you say, why can't you be more like your sister? Or even sometimes it comes off more subtly, like, your sister does this. That's comparison. Even if it doesn't seem like it in the moment or doesn't feel like it, it is still comparison. And, that's not to say that you don't ever recognize another sibling's hard work, but you don't do it directly at the other sibling, if that makes sense, right? So, yeah, I agree. Just as much as possible, avoid comparing your kids. It's just not a good road to go down. Okay, so another thing that we've talked about that I think also helps build confidence, and we'll just touch briefly on this, but it really does play into it, is praising effort rather than results, right? So, or praise without effort. So rather than just, you're so amazing, you can instead say, I noticed how persistent you are. That way, when kids don't do well at something, they're going to be okay. They're going to recognize, hey, I gave it my all. I tried really hard and I'm proud of the result because I know I tried hard. That is confidence right there. So, how do we teach humility without tearing down confidence? And this is a good one. And I want to start by saying that for young kids, it's actually normal for them to be almost a little more self-confident. And I don't know that I would call it arrogance. It's just this developmentally normal thing where, 5, 6-year-olds or 4 and 5-year-olds, they're like, look at how fast I am. Or like, look at how fast these shoes make me, is something that my baby brother used to say that I thought was just the funniest thing. So that's not necessarily arrogance. That's just developmentally normal. And I bring that up because I just want parents to be aware of it. But as we get into, more of those tween years, like that early adolescent years and into the teenage years, they shouldn't still be doing that. So how can we teach humility without tearing down their confidence?
Well, I think we have to understand humility as adults ourselves before we can begin to teach it, because we generally get humility wrong. We think we're humble when we tear ourselves down, when we put ourselves down that, I'm not as good or I don't do anything. Real humility is the capacity to understand ourselves accurately or to think of ourselves accurately. Humility teaches us that we can celebrate other people and their successes, like we were talking about earlier, without being diminished ourselves. Humility is a recognition that we can always learn. I always worry when somebody won't learn, when they think they know everything. I don't know if any of our listeners have ever worked with somebody or been around somebody who knows everything and you cannot say anything to them. It's interesting how little they generally know. And so somebody who's humble is always going to be learning. They're going to accept feedback. Doesn't mean that they have to agree with the feedback, but they'll accept it, right? If we think about a coach who maybe gives some criticism to a child, that's like, hey, you screwed this up and blah, 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 whatever, you need to make some changes. A humble individual would accept that feedback and go, okay, what can I do different? Where can I improve? What do I need to shift and change? Versus, somebody who's insecure is going to feel more like I'm terrible. Oh, I suck at this, or whatever it might be. Right. Or arrogance, right? They don't know what they're talking about. The coach is blind. He's clueless. He's just an old man, or she's just a crazy individual who doesn't understand, what's going on. So humility isn't like I suck. It's, there's something I can learn.
I think a good way to teach this, and us as adults too can practice this, is when someone gives us a compliment, we don't dismiss it, or we don't like, oh, that's not true, or diminish it. We can be humble and accept that and say, thank you so much for saying that. Whether you agree with it or not, or it makes you uncomfortable, just an easy response just to accept that and start practicing is, thank you so much for saying that.
Yeah, and that is something that I think we often see and that we often tend to do is, oh no, that we're dismissive of a compliment. Oh, well, there's this or there's that. And yeah, I agree. I think that is something we can all work on. I think another modeling piece too could be in where we put our focus as parents, right? So, we all have maybe actors or athletes, right? Or somebody who's kind of in the media, a media figure that we look up to or that we like, that we watch. Okay, so I particularly think of this with athletics. And there's nothing wrong with following sports or liking a sports team. But are we talking about the character of these athletes that we like or that we recognize, right? Because maybe we like a specific sports team, but there's one athlete that is just arrogant that nobody can stand. Are we talking about that, or are we dismissing that? Because kids are going to follow us and they're going to also pick their own idols. So cycling is a sport that I'm really into, which definitely makes me an anomaly, unfortunately, here in America. Like, oh man, I don't meet very many people who follow cycling. And it's a shame because the two best cyclists in the world right now have this massive rivalry, and yet they are incredibly humble about it, like impressively humble. In fact, they are competing on the world stage, and the first thing they do when one of them wins, the other one turns and congratulates the other, right? So like these two major competitors actually take the time to say, hey, congrats. That is confidence without arrogance. That is true humility.
Definitely.
All right, so helping teens build quiet confidence. So we want to encourage parents to help teens focus on things like character over popularity, progress over perfection, contribution over recognition, and learning over proving. And learning over proving is one that I used to really struggle with as a teen because I was afraid to not know. Like, I didn't want to come off as someone that didn't know something. I wanted to always be in the know. And so sometimes I would find myself pretending to just know what's going on. And that could be kind of normal as a teen. But you know what? I've found that I learn a lot more as an adult where I just say, I'm not sure, or I don't know what that is, and not being afraid to not know something. So how do we help teens come to this conclusion that it's okay that you don't know everything?
I think it starts with modeling in the home as parents ourselves. We should not be afraid to admit that we've made a mistake or that we don't know the answer. There is nothing wrong. Our children are not going to think less of us if we say, you know what, I don't have any idea. Let's figure that out. When they have a question, it teaches them that they don't have to know everything. We help them understand, hey, I'm still learning here. This is especially helpful in conflict with teenagers, is to admit that, hey, like I might not get this right. I'm still learning.
Yep.
It's also important to admit that we're wrong, like, because we're going to be wrong sometimes. And when we do these things, what we're teaching them is that we are strong, we're not weak, and we know our limitations. And as we model that, then we can move into teaching by the way we ask questions, what happens in our home, the questions we ask of our family, of the individual children in our home, whatever it is. We can ask things like, or we can have them maybe self-evaluate certain things, such as, did I grow today? Was I kind? Did I give it all the effort I have? Am I living my values, my beliefs? And as we ask those questions of ourselves, it doesn't diminish us. It doesn't create insecurity. What that does is it builds lasting confidence, because we're always evaluating where we're at without diminishing the efforts that we put in.
Yeah. The strongest people in life usually don't spend much time proving how strong they are. But I like this idea of asking these types of questions of, did I learn something instead of, did I get a high grade? Did I get a good grade? Instead, what did I learn? Or instead of, was I the best today at whatever activity I did at school? Or did I help somebody else? Is a much better way to help kids, self-evaluate. And I agree that does start with that modeling piece. So we want teens who are comfortable with learning, listening, growing, and encouraging others. And, they're not always going to get it right. And this is something that I feel like is a learned trait. It doesn't always come naturally. And so, is there a way to truly teach humility? I don't know, but I can tell you that the wrong way to teach humility is by tearing a kid down publicly, right? So if you've got a teen who is just arrogant and you just publicly point out their arrogance, or trying to humble them by anything that involves embarrassment or shame or, tearing down, that is the absolute wrong way to teach humility. So we definitely want to avoid doing that.
Most certainly, our focus really should shift, instead of trying to force humility on our children, which isn't helpful at all. But it really should be shift to building confidence. I actually believe when we build confidence, we increase humility, we decrease arrogance. And so one of the things that I would like to leave our listeners with is maybe a family challenge. And I want you to try this at least for like a month and see what kind of shifts you see in your family. So at dinner time, before bed, whenever you're all together, it doesn't really matter, whatever works for you. Have each person in your family answer 2 questions. Question 1 is, what is one strength that you used today? Were you kind? Were you strong? Did you use creativity? Were you honest? Did you have courage, patience? Something like that, right? What is one strength you used today? Number 2 is, who helped you today and who are you grateful for? And so the first question will build healthy self-confidence by recognizing personal growth and character. The second question keeps confidence grounded in humility by reminding teens that no one succeeds entirely on their own. Our successes are typically gained by other people around us who help us along the way.
And a great starting piece to model that is in your own marriage. So thank your partner, be grateful to them, and recognize, hey, this mom, dad, whatever, they really helped me out, right? They really are the reason why we are successful as a family, or why, we have this. So it's not going to come in a day. It's not going to come in a month. It's going to be built little by little over time. And that's how confidence is built. Nobody gets confident in a day. At least I've never heard of anybody ever just waking up one day and just being confident. It happens one experience at a time. Okay, so next week we are going to get into teaching teens to cope without escaping. Have a question? How about a topic you'd like us to cover? Send us an email at mentalhealthpod21@gmail.com.